record. And I would like to welcome you to this session that is titled really, really catchy and cool name, Fostering OER Organic Growth on College Campuses. Thank you all for joining us today. I will now turn it over to our session presenters, Tamar Bell and Jared Ince, so we can get started.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for joining our session. And our moderator, Gaith, was very kind on our session title. I was just saying, I hope my title is not too cheesy, right? But that was very encouraging. Thank you. So I'm so glad to be here and to share a little bit with all of you in our journey. And I'm Tamar Bell. I'm actually a full-time speech faculty at North Central Texas College, and our college is located in North Central in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. And Jared Ince is a wonderful co-presenter with me today. He is English faculty also at North Central Texas College. And we just want to share a little bit about our journey with OER growth on our campus. And really, it started when I was thinking about the word organic, OER organic, right? I looked up the definition, like what is organic? And when I went to etymology online, he was talking about how the root word of that word comes from like living organs, like humans, right? And I thought that was such a good representation of our work at NCTC with OER. And I was like sitting there and pondering the bridge between those two words. And I was just thinking about the fact how that is so true about OER growth on any college campus is there is a human element to it, right? There's like an unpredictable nature. There's a human element to it. It's living, it's breathing, it's growing. And that's what we're here to talk about is just our experience with that, the human element of OER growth on campus and how it affects so many people at our campus, faculty, administrators, students, and what we've learned from that process. So Jared can go to the next slide. I wanted to just briefly share a little bit about why I was really excited about OER. So when I learned about open education resources, it was about 10 years ago when another speech faculty member at another institution told me about it. But I think the importance for me started when I was a community college student. I always tell my students that I also went to a community college as I instruct them in the classroom. And I remember my first semester of being in college, I was so excited that I had all my classes paid for. It just seemed miraculous to even do that. I was a first generation college student, so I was just figuring it out all by myself. And I walked into the bookstore in the first week of classes to buy my textbook. And my biology textbook was over $300. And I had my first credit card that had a $300 limit. So all my textbooks that I needed to buy for my first semester was more than I had a limit on my credit card to purchase. And I was like, what am I going to do? So I had to get creative really fast on making sure I had the course material, but also not being able to afford the textbooks. But I think that's where my like passion for OER is rooted, is in my personal story of the struggle of paying for textbooks. So I know, having walked through that struggle for so many semesters of my college career, it was really important to me when I learned about OER. The next thing that I thought was really fueling my passion for OER was a few years ago, I was teaching an interpersonal communication class. And when I taught the interpersonal communication class, I had a student that couldn't afford the textbook. And I remember just kind of going through all the channels to see how we could help this student get a copy of the textbook. And by the time we went through all the channels to get some provision and funding for this student to get a copy of our textbook, she had dropped the class. And I just was so devastated as an instructor that we lost a student. And, that was one student that, could have completed the course had it not been for the textbook. So those are my whys. And that like fueled my passion to do this work and really stand behind just the amazing things that OER can do for students, for instructors, and for administrators, for campuses as a whole. So I started this process by just helping my division chair vetting some other OERs for the department. He would send me a copy and I would look through it and I would just say, okay, this seems like this is working well for our curriculum, for our specific student body. And we would just kind of go through that process. And then he had tasked me, well, okay, now you take over and implement an OER for the first time by yourself for interpersonal communication. And of course, he gave me a lot of support in the process, but asked me to take the lead. And that was in fall of 2021. So I started just looking for OERs just to kind of work through the process. I started looking through the OER Texas database and repository. And I just was going through that research process on finding the right OER for my class. I finally found the OER, and I remember thinking in the summer of 2022, I was supposed to write and implement this OER to the interpersonal communication course, and I didn't know where to start. And I was so thankful to the THECB that sponsored the professional development called Creator Communities Academy that I took in the summer of 2022. And it was 3 sessions where you would go and they would just give you all this foundational elements of how to implement and build an OER course. And that was so helpful to me. It made me feel much less afraid of just starting the process and working through it. So I went through an institutional process, meaning the funding to do this work came from within our college. And this was a little bit different than Jared's experience, which he's going to talk about in a moment. But essentially, my timeline looked different because I went through the institutional process. So I started in the fall of 2021, just kind of being tasked with this and going through the process of looking for my OER book for interpersonal communication. Once I found it, I spent the summer of 2022 doing that professional development. And then the second session of summer, I did this instead of teaching any summer courses in our school. So I was tasked with that idea of just putting it all together. And then in the fall of 2022, we went ahead and launched the pilot of this course, and I've been teaching it since and getting feedback from students and continually making better. And the main thing I want to say is, as I was going through the institutional process, because we didn't have anything in place yet, it was kind of like paving the way, paving the road. And there was a lot of unknowns in that process. Like, I didn't know when I was getting paid for the work or if I would actually be paid for the work because, that communication and channel was still happening. We are really fortunate at North Central Texas College where we have administrators that really support this work. And I had, my dean and my division chair really advocating for this work. And I was very thankful for that. But a lot of the times it just was like, unknown. Like, we don't know, there's no process, we're just kind of starting this out. How is this going to work? Is it enough time in the summer to put this all together? So there was a lot of question marks, a lot of trial and error, but I was thankful for a lot of support in that process. So there was a big learning curve, and I know that the professional development I took was like really helpful in launching me in that process. So I'm going to turn it over to my co-presenter, Jared, who's going to talk a little bit about his process on the grant side and his experiences there.
Thanks, Tamar. So yeah, my process was a little bit different. I actually started in the fall of 2020 when my division chair asked me if I would be interested in developing a new technical writing course using OER. Now, of course, I said yes without really knowing what I was getting into, which I'm glad I did. But at the time, I didn't even know what OER was. I had to ask her what that actually was. And the process started with me trying to find um, the right kinds of materials for this technical writing course. We'd had a course that the whole department was using for a while. It was a very good course with a textbook that I really liked, but the course needed to be updated, and it was a good time to think about new text options. And so I started looking for an OER that could kind of fill that same need. And I had a lot of trouble for a while. There weren't a lot of good options out there. Um, and I feel like I finally got lucky. I'd been searching, and another member of the department passed along a book that she'd found. And that's the one I ended up using for this course. Um, but at the same time, while I was trying to find a resource, I was trying to find funding to do this project as well. And that's when I applied to the something I'm sure most of y'all are probably familiar with, the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board's OER Course Development and Implementation Grant Program. This program has actually two different grants in it. One is a development grant for creating new OER. The current version of the grant is for up to $25,000 with matching from the institution to, like I said, create a new OER material. And I actually applied for the implementation portion of that grant, which is up to $5,000 with matching from the institution, just to take an existing OER that's available and create a course or redesign a course to implement that OER, and then make it public for anybody to use. And that's the process that I wanted to go through. And I was awarded the grant in the summer of 2021 in July, and from that point, I took this book that I'd found, and I started just basically from scratch writing a new course. And I started teaching the course in the fall, piloting the course for the first time while I was still writing it. I had another faculty member piloting it with me, and I was sending her assignment models and new instructions, and she was very patient with me as I kind of continued to develop this course as we were teaching it. And when I finished it towards the end of the fall semester, I sent it for an external review from a faculty member not associated with NCTC to review the course and give me some feedback. And that person gave me feedback. And between that and the pilots and feedback from students, I was able to revise the course and pilot it again in the spring. And by the summer of 2022, I had a course that I felt comfortable publishing to the OERTX database, and also giving it to my department to use as a template for any instructor at NCTC that was teaching technical writing that wanted to use that course. And now it's used pretty much universally throughout the whole English department. I thought this went really, really well, and I was really excited when I had the opportunity to try it all again. And this is when Tamar and I began kind of working together on the next iteration of this THECB grant. And this is an ongoing one. We applied for it at the very beginning of 2023, and the THECB made a few changes to this version of the grant than the one that I had been experienced with. They stretched it out a little bit more and turned it into a 2-year project. So we're about halfway through right now. But it also gave us the opportunity to expand this out to really to college-wide and create a project that could be worked on by multiple divisions within the college. And so we actually were awarded basically two grants within this program. One is a development grant we have a faculty member creating a microbiology lab manual and developing images and writing the manual and basically creating something that fills a hole that we had that the science department had, and that's that none of the microbiology lab manuals that currently existed that they were able to use didn't really match up with the learning objectives for the class very well. And so this new manual that's being developed and being piloted right now um, matches those learning objectives perfectly. And we're really excited about that. And then we also were awarded the implementation side of this program. And we have English, education, music, and philosophy courses that have been developed and are being piloted right now under this project. Really like that it's now a 2-year cycle. It allowed more time for development. It allowed us to kind of broaden our scope a little bit more. And it also allowed more time for piloting and revision and kind of putting the final touches on those projects. This project for both the development and the implementation will end next summer. And at that point, we'll have 4 courses and this lab manual created and published to the OERTX database and available for anybody that wants to use them. I love that. I think it's super exciting. Now, we took my experiences and kind of turned it into expanding NCTC's activity with this grant program. But we also took Tamar's experiences and tried to create an internal program as well. And so we this past spring, in coordination with deans and the provost and the board of regents, we created a process for faculty to implement OER into courses that they're designing. And so we used kind of the grant model because the structure was already there, and we shrank it a little bit. And so starting in June of this past summer, 2024, we had 13 instructors across 11 different courses creating these new courses or revising them heavily to implement OER that they had found. 3 of those courses had already used OER, and so we were just adopting new OER materials and revising the courses pretty heavily. But the other 8 courses were brand new to using OER. They used traditional publisher resources before that. We are now piloting those 11 courses this fall semester. The instructors are working with outside faculty from other institutions to review those courses, and our goal is to, based on the pilots, based on student feedback, based on the external reviews, to publish these courses to the OERTX database this spring, really in January at the start of the new semester, and to make these courses available to anybody outside of NCTC, but also anybody within those respective departments that wants to use them as templates. One of our goals with this and is to create templates that faculty aren't forced to use, but that faculty are able to use, especially and one of the groups of people that Tamar and I have in mind are adjunct faculty that are hired at NCTC, and we want to make sure that they have the materials ready if they're hired a week before school starts, that they can walk in to the classroom confident that they have materials ready, that they can teach the course, and also at the same time that students have access to all the materials they need. And so we're really pleased with how things are going so far. It was important to us that throughout all this process that both faculty and the reviewers were paid for the extraordinary time and effort that they put into this. And so we worked with our Board of Regents to kind of develop an internal grant of sorts, and to make sure that over this summer throughout this project that the faculty were paid for the work that they are doing. Now, I'm really happy with what we've done, but there are some challenges that we should acknowledge related to this kind of work. One of those challenges is that for many courses and for many faculty, the publisher materials that are already available with even integration into Canvas and with extra resources that might come with those textbooks, they make life a lot easier on the front end for a lot of faculty and even for many students. And I think we have to acknowledge that. And we also have to recognize that many faculty really are, they've been doing the same thing for so long. They're invested in maintaining that status quo in a sense, and saying this has always worked for me. Why would I want to change when this works so well for myself and for my students as things exist right now? There's also been a small degree of faculty reluctance that we've encountered occasionally, that I've heard at other presentations, that I've heard from faculty members that I've talked to, of this fear of being forced to adopt something that they don't want to adopt, or to even experiment with it. I think there is a justifiable fear that if I experiment with OER for my course and it doesn't work, I may not have the opportunity to go back to the resources that I've been using before. And Tamar and I have worked really carefully to make sure, at least at NCTC, that faculty don't feel that way, that if they want to experiment with OER, they have the opportunity to do that. And we'll fight for them to make sure that they can go back to the publisher resources that they've used before if that's what they feel they need to do, if that's what's right for their course. While at the same time, we're trying to encourage them to at least try it, right? To at least test it out and see how it works, because we do have a lot of faith in this process and the opportunities that OER might present. And then finally, and you probably picked this up on what we've been saying, the level of resource investment is sometimes a challenge with OER work. Making sure that faculty get paid for the work that they're doing is very, very important, but also acknowledging that there is a huge time commitment involved with this kind of work. And we've tried to do a lot of this over the summer terms, so that faculty have a little bit more freedom to work on what they need to work on, while they're not trying to teach, a full semester's worth of classes at the same time. And we've tried to make sure that faculty are paid at least similarly to what they would be paid for teaching a class during the summer, while we're developing these kinds of courses. Now, those are challenges, but there's also a lot of successes with the work that we've been doing. And I think the most important one is how much students appreciate what we're doing. How much students appreciate when faculty are working with OER and implementing these things into their courses, both in terms of savings, not having to pay for an $80 or $150 or $300 textbook for a course, and not always knowing how much that textbook is going to cost when you sign up for the course. That's a lot for a student. And the excitement that I see on some students' faces when they walk into the class and realize that I didn't have to buy anything for this course and it's all right there ready for me. I can just sign in. We use Canvas at NCTC. I can just sign into Canvas and there's everything I need. It's really exciting for students. And even though I know publisher resources can be integrated into the LMS, it is my experience that the OER resources provide a simpler form of access. There's no extra logins, there's no extra paywalls, and it really reduces student frustration during that first week of the semester, when they can just get in, they can click on the links, they can open the resources, and they're ready to go. That's a pleasure to see. And I mentioned some faculty reluctance, but there's also a lot of faculty enthusiasm that we've encountered as well. Um, in my experience, OER offers a level of academic freedom, at least for my courses, that uh, isn't always available with more traditional resources. And um, I know I can, yes, I could assign 2 textbooks, right? And that's a lot for a student, and I don't want to do that. But I can assign as many OER as I want, and mix and match and incorporate them into the course. And um, I can create a really flexible sort of set of resources, um, while still maintaining that academic rigor that I know um, students need, and uh, that we want to give to students. We want to make sure that they have all the resources that they can have, and that they're learning as much as they possibly can from those courses. And then finally, uh, we found that this kind of work really excites the administration as well, and I think that's valuable. At least at NCTC, I know our deans and our department chairs and um, the even higher level administration, the Board of Regents, they're all very excited about the work that is being done here in terms of OER, and um, part of that is the reasons I've already mentioned. Uh, saving money for students, making sure that the courses are as robust as they possibly can, but also um, OER makes schools more competitive, right? Um, when you can say, look, you can take your core classes at our institution and not have to buy textbooks. Um, it's not rolled into the cost of your classes. You just don't have to buy textbooks at all. Um, is a big selling feature, and I think um, I found that administrators, when it's presented in that way, are really excited to work with these kinds of resources, and to fuel the growth of these kinds of resources on campus. Um, and so that kind of leads us to at least one way of looking at this, and that's in terms of student savings. I don't think it's the only way of measuring success by any means, but um, it is a very impactful way, I think, for students. And so since 2018, we've kind of been monitoring um, the OER courses that are being developed at NCTC, and since over those past 6 years, these OER courses, students not having to pay for textbooks in those courses saves students over $1.3 million, just at our institution. And we've got from this summer project, we've got 8 more courses that are being added to this list this fall that are currently being piloted, and that will be taught by many more instructors next spring. And so we expect that these numbers continue to grow. And um, to me, again, it's not the only way to measure success, but I think it's a really big deal, and I think it's something we should acknowledge. The, the financial good that we're doing to students in terms of the educational process. So I'll turn it back over to Tamar. She's going to talk a little bit about the administrative support, and how to grow um, these kinds of projects on your own campus. And so Tamar, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Jared. So I listed just 5 things as we're kind of like bringing this all together of what we learned in the process. And this doesn't mean like everything or some of this list or, part of this list may be exactly fitting to you. But the hopes is like, here is what we learned from our experiences. And if you can glean from any of them, it's a victory in shared experiences. So the first one was just the time investment that this takes, and we can't emphasize enough like the time, the support, and the compensation needed that Jared mentioned in order to work through this process, because so much of faculty, administrators, leaders on our campus have invested themselves into this process. So it does take time, and I think the idea here is to really work with one faculty member at a time, one course at a time. And though it might be like feeling like a slower process, but I think the process for it to go that way, especially on our campus specifically, was really important because I think it contributes to the longevity of this work and the quality of this work. So I think a lot of it is just seeing bigger picture. Like maybe we don't have immediate results, but it's kind of like we keep adding to this conversation and we keep adding to this work, and it is growing. And 6 years into this, looking back in hindsight, Jared and I have seen a lot of progress, and we're seeing a lot of momentum in this work on our college campus. So the second thing that Jared did mention that I wanted to kind of repeat here, because I think it's helpful to be repeated, is for the institutional process that we worked with, like where we took what we did in the grant and implemented the same model, because I thought it was so effective, implemented the same model on kind of a shortened scale that Jared mentioned. We focused on doing these projects over the summer when we worked within the institution. So when the funds came from just within the institution, this really helped. I know I did this the first time I implemented an OER for my interpersonal course, but it was also helpful because what we would encourage is, to take one summer session to focus on this implementation process. And I think that was helpful to myself and to all the faculty members working on the last summer project we did in the summer of 2024, just a few months ago, because it helps them feel less torn between their faculty duties during the semester, their committee work during the semester, and all the other, fun hats that we wear as faculty members that we switch on and off. But yes, I think the summer focus was a helpful thing when we worked within the institution, because it did make faculty feel less torn in the process and help them write, course material in the quality they were wanting the course to be in, which is a big victory, both for the institution, for the students, and for the faculty members to be happy with the product of OER that they've implemented to their class. And I think that work speaks for themselves. So this kind of transitions me in my third thing that we learned was I went to an OpenStax conference last year, and someone used this term there, so I'm giving credit to them, citing my sources. But the term was making sure that you're really working with green light faculty, and I like that. This isn't a forced process like Jared was explaining and kind of reiterating, but it's really just kind of working alongside people that are already excited. And sometimes you have a yellow light person that's like unsure. Jared mentioned somebody wants to explore it but they're not sure, and just letting them work through that process. And again, that goes back to the title of our presentation, that it is like a living organic process, and letting people work through that process is important. So just letting this work speak for itself. I think a lot of faculty members who may have been unsure about implementing or writing OER for their courses are seeing, the amazing work their coworkers are doing, and just getting excited about it themselves. And the main thing is that Jared and I always make ourselves available to answer any questions, and we kind of let it be faculty led, where if they're excited, they want to do it, we're here to support you. We're here to advocate for you. But by no means, we're not going to kind of like pummel anyone's door or kind of come across as making OER their thing. We want to make sure that it's intrinsic and people are wanting to do this for themselves. And I think that helps. I think when people want to do it, the process looks a lot more effective in one sense. So the fourth thing I thought was really helpful throughout this process, and I mentioned at the beginning, was just doing really good professional development. I can't encourage enough, like all of the great professional development that was on the OER Texas repository. I did mention in the beginning the Creator Academy, but I also just, when I started this process, looked up in the repository all of different professional developments, and they're all recorded webinars that you can go back to and listen to. I know we have the playbook, the OER playbook, guidebook, handbook. There are so many things available, and sometimes it's just, you know, taking the time to look at those things. And I know that I kind of bank links of things from the OER Texas repository so that when a faculty member has a question on how something works, you know, I offer that as support. And I think that really helps, is like professional development that's made available to make sure that our faculty members feel confident in starting this process. And that was the experience I had. It made me feel confident that I can do this, right? I don't need to be, you know, working for a well-renowned publisher to do this, right? So much of this is, you know, gives us free rein as faculty to kind of choose our materials. And I think Jared mentioned this also, but I love that when you are using an OER, right? Because, you know, students aren't directly paying for the textbook. You can use multiple mediums of OER and kind of integrate them together. I absolutely love the remixing tool in the OER Texas repository. And it's just such a great feature to kind of make things your own. So I think the professional development is something that's helpful. You all are here for the Open Texas Conference and then Open Education Week in the spring. I think those are all great springboards for us as faculty members, administrators to kind of grow in this process. But the last point I wanted to make was just the idea of when Jared and I started this process, that we were just excited to implement one OER for one class. Like, I remember when my division chair asked me, and as Jared had shared, his division chair had asked him about implementing OER. We were just so excited to do that. And I didn't see beyond that. I just was so excited to do this work and, you know, offer my students this amazing open education resource in our classroom that had a, you know, a high quality written textbook. It was available and at no cost to them, and just starting that process. But a lot of it was just kind of like a step-by-step, slow and gradual growth. And what happened was, like, after we each implemented our own OER in our own courses and work through the revising and editing of that process for that next year, our dean came to us and said, we wanted to let you know that, you know, there's a new cycle of grants being made available, and would you co-direct it? Would you be on that grant and manage the grant and help support the faculty who are starting this process? And we're like, yes, that's amazing, right? And we went through that process, and we are still doing that, and it's been a wonderful experience. But just not that long after that, about a year after that, just in the last spring, as Jared had mentioned, our provost then came to us and said, do you want to do this process within the institution? And we're like, yes, that's great, right? We stand behind OER. We'd love to grow this at the institution. So it wasn't like something that we kind of had asked to do or realized that was going to happen, but we just started by, you know, just implementing the OER for our class. And then the work just grew. And I think, again, I mentioned this work just kind of speaks for itself. I think when faculty are excited to do it, we've seen amazing work. I know the faculty we worked with over summer, after every meeting that Jared and I had, we'd spend, you know, the last 10 minutes of the meeting just blown away at all of our faculty and how they've implemented OER respective to their subject matter, and what a great work they've done. So a lot of it, as we close in our discussion, is just like that organic process, right? I like this quote. It said, as faculty choose to adopt a more open pedagogy, they also have an open style of pedagogy that's more mindful of the human focused element. So all of this to kind of bring it together is like, we've had a great experience growing OER, and our work's not done. It's going to continue to grow. It's a slow and steady process. And we started with just one class within our own subject matters, and to watch it grow has just been so amazing. And I think a lot of it is just kind of encouraging, supporting, and just looking at it bigger picture. It's not going to be overnight, but it's a lot of just kind of coming alongside our faculty members, coming alongside administrators who have questions about this, and just letting the work speak for itself. So we're so thankful that you came to listen to our experience in our presentation today. We wanted to leave just a few minutes before we end for questions. I know we had one question in the chat box that I wanted to answer that I didn't get to, but we're thankful that you've allowed us to share and came to hear us.
Thank you, Tamar, and thank you, Jared, for a great presentation and lots of knowledge to be shared. And I loved your the terminology about the green light faculty. And I think you can transfer that into so many other professions too as well. I'm gonna quote you, I'm gonna steal that in my day-to-day work. So I appreciate you for the inspiration. We do have a question in the chat from Lisa Louise. Her question is, who pays for faculty to work on these OER projects? Their departments, academic affairs, or someone else? If you don't mind elaborating on that too as well. And please keep the questions coming.
Jared, do you want to answer or you want me to take it?
I think, yeah, I'll start, and you could probably fill in some of the blanks, because it does come from multiple directions, right? So in some cases with the grant process, we did get money from the grants, and that was matched by NCTC. So, and that came from multiple places, both from department budgets and from other sources within the larger budget at NCTC. And then with this most recent project, the implementation project that we did this summer, that was an internal grant created by our Board of Regents. So we created a proposal and presented that to them last spring, and they set aside a chunk of money for us to kind of direct this program for the 13 faculty that were involved with that. So lots of different places, kind of trying to find money where you can find it to make sure that people are paid for their efforts.
Yeah, and I'll just add, before we had the process of the board support, that it was specific to the department. Some of the funding just came directly from the department. So yes.
Thank you. Any other questions for our great presenters today? I do also want to mention that Carrie put a link for our OER text as a great starting point. So if you want to check the chat and click on the link and bookmark it and check it out sometime later, it's really a great resource, the OER Texas.
I also saw that Carrie put out a link that the 4th grant cycle will kind of be announced soon in the fall. I saw that and I was very excited about that.
Yes.
Yes, stay tuned for that. We're hoping to announce it in the next month plus-ish.
Wonderful. We will stay tuned. Thank you, Carrie.
Any other questions? If not, I want to again thank our presenters. I want to thank our captioner, Don, for giving us their time with us to do the captioning. Thank you all for spending Friday with us, and we hope to see you. And don't forget to, if you have anything to keep track of the discussion board, It's called Keep On OER Talking, Texas and Beyond. So make sure if you have anything, you can check it out there over there too as well. Carrie, any last minute before we close the session? Last minute notes from you?
I don't think so. Just thanks everyone, and we'll see you at the closing